But what we're going to do this morning, and I've got, this talk can be as long or as short as you like, because we're going to talk about a lot of history. And I've got to finish by about 10 past 10, so that's 45 minutes. We're going to cover 2,000 years. So you can do the maths, but we've got a fair bit to talk about. And what we're going to talk about is the Roman Empire over the last 2,000 years in Eastern and in Western Europe, because that's, at least as far as we're concerned, the important part of Daniel chapter 2 for us. Now, this is what Brother Thomas says in Elpis Israel about the image of Daniel chapter 2. He says that the future movements of Russia are notable signs of the times because they're predicted in the scriptures of truth. That means the Bible predicts what Russia's going to do in the future. The Russian autocracy in its plenitude and on the verge of dissolution is the image of Nebuchadnezzar standing upon the mountains of Israel, ready to be smitten by the stone. So when the Russian government builds its empire up to a climax, if you like, and that empire is in control of the land of Israel, that is, after Russia invades Israel, at that point, the image of Daniel chapter 2 stands, and it will be destroyed on the mountains of Israel. When Russia makes its grand move, therefore, for the building up of its image empire, let the reader know that the end of all things, as at present constituted, is at hand. So when Russia looks like they're going to try and establish a world empire and invade the land of Israel, when it looks like it's going to do that, then get ready, because Jesus Christ is on the way. And the kingdom of God is on the way. That's what it means when Brother Thomas says that the dissolution, or the end rather, of all things as at present constituted is at hand. That is the end of this age. The end of this society is at hand when Russia starts to do that. Well, let me tell you, Russia is beginning to do that, and that's why we say the Lord Jesus Christ is not very far away. Now, here's what Daniel chapter 2 looks like. So the image we just spoke about that Brother Thomas speaks of in Elpis Israel is that image there that I'm sure you're all extremely familiar with. It's the image of Daniel chapter 2. And that image had, four, if you like, four or five, perhaps we'll say five component parts to it. It has a head of gold, which was the Babylonian Empire. A chest and arms of silver, which was the Medo-Persian Empire. A belly and thighs of brass, which was the Greek Empire, and legs of iron, Roman Empire, and feet of iron and clay. That's the empire of today, the European empire of today. And then, of course, you can see we've got right to the bottom of that image, after the divided empire of iron and clay, we have the kingdom of God. That's the story of Daniel chapter 2. And you'll recall, young people, how the stone came out of a mountain, cut out without hands, and it smote the image upon the feet, toppled the image, broke it to pieces, and then ground it to powder. A wind came and blew that dust of that powder away, and that stone grew like this, and it filled the whole world, speaking of the fact that Christ's kingdom will be a worldwide kingdom for the next 1,000 years. That's the story of Daniel chapter 2. Now, I'm not going to tell you any more about that because you probably know all of that. What I'm going to show you is one other feature when we compare Daniel chapter 2 to Daniel chapter 7, and this is a very important point. How many phases, or how many empires, let's say, did we just describe in Daniel chapter 2 before the kingdom of God comes? How many? Babylon? 5. He says 5. Is that right or is that wrong? That's right. We did describe 5. The gold, look, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and the divided empire, and then the kingdom of God. So 5 empires, if you like, before the kingdom of God. Now, you'll be aware that Daniel chapter 2 is the kingdom of men from Nebuchadnezzar's point of view, because it was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So that's how man sees the kingdom of men. This great image, this great warrior, shining and bright, bulletproof. How does God see the kingdom of men? Well, he sees it in 4 animals in Daniel chapter 7. The lion, the bear, the leopard, And the fourth beast, the fourth unnamed beast of Daniel 7 verse 7. That's what Daniel saw, if you like. That's God's view of the kingdom of men. It's a bunch of wild animals. So here's the question. How many phases of the kingdom of men do you see in Daniel chapter 7 prior to the kingdom of God? Not very hard, is it? 4. Okay, so Daniel 2 says there's 5. Daniel 7 says there's 4. Is there 5 or is there 4? 4. But there's 5. But there's 4. What's the answer to the riddle? Can you see that, in fact, Rome and the divided empire are both the same thing? And, we're coming back. The Roman Empire existed 2,000 years ago, and as far as Daniel's concerned, that empire will be the empire that exists when the Lord Jesus Christ returns, because that's what Daniel 7 says. Therefore, the critical point is that the Roman Empire is a 2,000-year empire, and all you're waiting to see prior to the return of the Lord Jesus Christ is a resurrection of the Roman Empire, the last days phase of the Roman Empire. That's why the book of Revelation has beast, beast, beast with 10 horns, because the Roman Empire has gone through many different phases since the early days when it was first established, and there is a phase of the Roman Empire that will exist in our day also. That's what Christ will destroy when he comes. Now, why am I labouring the point? I'm labouring it for this reason. You do not expect the rise of a big Muslim empire, for example, before Christ comes. You do not expect the rise of a big Arab empire before Christ comes, or a Chinese empire, or any other sort of empire. Why not? Because if you were to do so, there would have to be another beast. You see? There is no other beast. Christ will destroy the Roman beast when he comes. We're not looking for the rise of any other empire. We're looking for the resurrection, if you like, of the Roman Empire in the last days. Very simple. Daniel chapter 2 compared with Daniel chapter 7. Okay, now what happens? The Roman Empire took for itself a certain insignia, that is, a badge, a symbol which it used. And you read about this when you read Deuteronomy 28 and when you read Matthew 24. Because in Deuteronomy 28, Moses told the nation, many, many hundreds of years after my death, he says, you're going to serve Yahweh thy God, you won't serve Yahweh thy God, therefore thou shalt serve thine enemies which Yahweh thy God shall send against thee. And he'll put a yoke of iron upon thy neck. Well, you see, the Roman Empire was an empire of iron. And in 70 AD, the Roman Empire took the nation of Israel captive into its empire and depopulated the land of Israel, and they were all scattered abroad throughout Eastern and Western Europe in the confines of the Roman Empire. They had a yoke of iron upon thy neck. And then Yahweh, it says, shall bring against thee from the far end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies, a nation whose tongue you won't understand. So in come these Romans, holding banners of eagles, because that was the military ensign of the Roman Empire, and they destroyed the nation of Israel in 70 AD. And Jesus, said in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 28, wheresoever the carcass is, that is, wherever the Jewish carcass is, by which he meant the nation, we're going to kill the nation as like a dead body, wherever that carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. And the Roman Empire fed, if you like, on the corpse of the decaying nation of Israel. They ruled it for a certain time. The Jews kept revolting and uprising. So eventually they just destroyed the whole lot and took the people into captivity as slaves, killed many hundreds of thousands of them, and took the rest into slavery throughout the empire. And that eagle looked like that. That's what the eagle of the Roman Empire looked like. Now, what's strange do you see about that eagle? It's got 2 heads. Why did the Roman eagle have 2 heads? And this is where we begin to use the whiteboard. So you have to be able to see this. Why did the Roman eagle have 2 heads? Well, not quite two empires. Let's say two capital cities. One in the east and one in the west. So that eagle, that one head looks east and one head looks west, you see. So it was an empire of two halves. Now, what were the capital cities? What was the western capital of the Roman Empire? Which city? Rome. That tricked you, didn't it? And what was the eastern capital of the Roman Empire? Constantinople. What's the modern name for Constantinople? Whereabouts is Istanbul, kids? Whereabouts is that? Constantinople. Correct, in Turkey. So there were two capital cities, one in the east and one in the west of the Roman Empire. That's what the eagle has two heads, because he looks both ways, you see. They control the whole of Europe, east and west. Now, I'm just getting ahead of myself. I've just got to check what my next slide is. There are those two capitals. One in the east, one in the west. Rome in the west, Constantinople in the east. That's what the Roman Empire looked like. Well, then history takes over, you see, because over here in the west, by 476 AD, this capital was overtaken by the barbarians, by one of the Gothic nations, you see, and in 476 they took the capital city of Rome and they held it for 60 years. Well, you know, what happens is that the Roman Empire in the west, in Western Europe, it actually broke in pieces quite slowly. If you like, it dissolved over time. And so historians have to decide, when the empire sort of falls and declines, what year do we say that it actually dies? Well, they say when the capital city has been taken and held for more than a day or two or a week or two, like 60 years, that's it. That's the official end of the Roman Empire in Western Europe. So if I go back one slide, you see that? You see the capital Rome there? That red empire died in 476 AD. But the purple empire that was controlled from Constantinople, absolutely impregnable. Extreme military strength. Enormously powerful capital city in Constantinople there in Turkey, that yellow dot. It could not be taken. It couldn't be taken. At least not then. And so these invasions of all these tribes, as you can see all those different arrows, those different colour lines, were the invasions of the barbarians. They took off Western Europe and destroyed the western leg of the Roman Empire. That is, you could think of it like this. They cut off one of the heads of that double-headed eagle, didn't they? That's what happened in 476 AD. Well, in the east, so 476 AD, we've got Rome, well, the Goths. The Ostrogoths that, in fact, took the Roman Empire in the west. Over here in the east, no problem. Nothing can really go wrong in the east. Well, not much. Until what year? What year did the Eastern Roman Empire die? What year was the other head of the eagle cut off? Any takers? So the question is, what year did Constantinople fall? 1453. And who did it fall to? A magnificent fellow, as you say. The Ottoman Turks. And they took it and they called their country Turkey, eventually. So this is what happened. This is what's going to happen to the two sides of the Roman Empire. Now, then a remarkable thing happened. This empire was taken by the Goths in 476, but I told you they only held it for 60 years. And then the Italians took it back, and it lumbered along as a disorganised country, if you like, or Western Europe was extremely disorganised for a few hundred years until a very significant thing happened. A certain man stood up who was from France. In fact, he was the king of France. And he decided to help the Pope. Now, what had happened is, all these invasions that I spoke to you about here, all these invasions that came into Western Europe, they were by people called barbarians. And they were called barbarians because the Romans thought they weren't educated. They, in fact, were quite educated and they were very good soldiers. And the problem was that the Roman Empire got very lazy, and they decided that if you were a Roman citizen, you didn't have to join the army, you didn't have to pay tax. What we'll do is we'll hire people into the army, we'll call them mercenaries, we'll pay them to fight our wars for us. Well, by about 450 AD, the Huns started to come across, which was an extremely ferocious and powerful barbarian tribe. And all the other barbarians ran for their lives into the Western Roman Empire. And they said to the ruler of the Western Roman Empire, can we come across the Danube River and can we have sanctuary in the Roman Empire? And he said, no, you can't. But we're all going to get killed. All right, come across the river. So into the Western Roman Empire come these barbarians. And then they said, now we're here, can we have some land? Because, you know, we've been fighting your wars for you. And he says, well, I've been paying you to fight my wars. You're not Roman citizens. No, you can't have land. And so they said, well, we're going to take it. What are you going to do? Bring out the army? We are the army. And so, of course, the barbarians started to take land, and then, of course, the Western Roman Empire fell because nobody could stop them, because the Roman army itself, in fact, was comprised mainly of them. Well, they were different to the Pope. You see, they were Christian. They had adopted many of the customs of the Roman Empire, but they weren't Trinitarian, they were Arian. That means they believed in one God, they didn't believe in three gods. And if I keep going back to this, you see they come down into Rome. They took Rome. Well, that's where the Pope lived. And they, at various times, decided they might actually get rid of the Pope. And so the Pope's extremely worried. So he says, I need help. I need to stay alive. What will I do? Well, I'll ring one of my friends. And I'll get him to bring his army for France and help me. What was the name of that friend? 800 AD. Did somebody say it? Charlemagne. Charles the Great. Maine, Charles is Charles, Maine is Magnus, meaning large or great. Charlemagne. And in Charlemagne, in 800 AD, Charles. Sorry, it's too long a word to speak in right. In 800 AD, Charlemagne and the Pope held hands and they formed what's called here the Holy Roman Empire, because it was an allegiance of church and state. The church and the state got together and formed an empire. That empire began in Aachen in Germany. The capital then moved to Frankfurt. Then the capital finally ended up in Vienna when this empire was destroyed. But this empire would last for how long? I'm going to call it the HRE. The Holy Roman Empire would last how long? Very powerful empire. What year did it die? Approximately. What do you think? Not bad. 1783. I'm going to say approximately the year 1800. And who killed it? Another very famous Frenchman. Another very famous Frenchman who was a soldier. He killed the Holy Roman Empire. What was it? Napoleon Bonaparte. So for 1,000 years, this Holy Roman Empire existed in Western Europe until Napoleon Empire dropped it on its head and killed it. That's what he did in about the year, exactly in the year 1806, after the Battle of Austerlitz. Well, that was what happened in Western Europe, you see. Now, anybody got any idea who that is? Charles. How do you know Charles? This is Charlemagne. And look what he's wearing. Now, I realise it's a statue, but look what he's wearing. What's he wearing? What's that pattern he's got on his jumper? Not quite. The one-headed eagle. Can you see? It's actually got one head. Why? Because he only rules the Western Roman. He doesn't rule both sides. He only rules the West. But can you see? He's a Roman. Now, he came from France. He helps the Pope get his life back. But he's a Roman. And he's using the Roman symbol for his soldiers and for his armaments. Well, that was... We've got all the way down to 1800 in the Western Roman Empire. Now, let's come and talk about the Eastern Roman Empire. We've got to 1453, and the Ottoman Turks now control Constantinople. What happened to all the Romans? What happened to all the Christians of Constantinople after after Turkey or the Ottoman Turks took over Constantinople. Well, in fact, they all fled. And there's a story in history you see about the three Romes. The first Rome, see that little square at the very top? Maybe I've got a better picture of that actually. There you are. The first Rome is Rome. Constantinople, when it was formed by Constantine in 300 AD, was called Nova Roma. What do you think Nova Roma means? New Rome. It's like York and New York, or Hampshire and New Hampshire, Rome and New Rome. But after Constantine's death, they said, no, he's far too important a person not to have a city named after him. Let's call it Constantinople, or the city of Constantine. So that's what Istanbul, prior to it being called Istanbul, that was what it was called. Well, what happened, of course, was the Turks came into Constantinople, and they weren't Christian. They were Muslim. And there's a big problem, you see, for the Christians in Constantinople, because the Turks, well, they didn't have a very good time. And particularly the royal family, the Roman royal family who lived in Constantinople, had a very tough time under the Turks. In fact, they weren't even prepared to give it a go. What did they do? They fled from Constantinople straight to Rome when the Turkish armies came against Constantinople and took it. They quickly left the city and got out to save their lives. And so they go to Rome. And then a remarkable thing happens. In 1472, there was a certain Russian gentleman called Ivan the Great. And he was looking to expand his Russian empire. He was quite an aggressive military soldier, and he's looking to expand his empire. And so he does a bit of a now he wasn't real attractive, so he had to go on the hunt for a wife for quite a long time. And lo and behold, he turns up in Rome. And he says to the Pope, amongst other things, well, you know, at some point I'd like to have an heir, a descendant, but for that I'm going to need a wife. Do you have any recommendations? Now, he didn't want to just marry anybody. He wanted to marry a queen of some kind, because he was a king, you see, from Russia. And the Pope said, well, that's a funny thing you ask, because, do you know, in 1453, the Turks took Constantinople. This Russian was, I know. Okay, now, listen to me, says the Pope. They took Constantinople. And do you know what happened? The royal family from Constantinople came to me, to Rome, because they just came from one capital to the next capital. And I've got this young lady living in one of my apartments. She's called Sophia Paleologos. She is the niece of the last Roman emperor of Constantinople. She's a queen. Maybe you could marry her. Ivan says, well, let's see her. Well, and she walks, he says, I'll marry her. Now, the Pope had a plan, you see. He thought, this will be really good. I'll get Ivan to marry Sophia, and Sophia will go back up to Russia with Ivan, and she'll convert him to Roman Catholicism. And the Pope says, and that will make my empire even bigger. Then I'll control all the Christians in Russia as well as Western and Eastern Europe. Well, the plan didn't really work. There's no question. Ivan married Sophia, and he took her back to Moscow. That's certainly true. What religion was she? What sort of Christianity did she believe, however, before she came to the Pope? Well, she was in Constantinople. She believed a brand of Christianity called Eastern Orthodoxy, which is just Eastern Roman Christianity, but it's slightly different to Roman Catholic Christianity. And probably the only main difference is that their priests wear black and the Roman Catholic ones wear white. Pretty much everything else is the same, but they got a different dress standard. Well, there's a little more to it than that, but let's leave it there. Sophia marries Ivan, and he takes her back to Moscow, and Moscow becomes the third Rome. Now, here's what you've got to understand. Let me come up here, I'll show you. Daniel's image. It's got two legs because there are two capitals of the Roman Empire. So when Daniel dreamt of his image, he could see one leg on Rome in the west and one leg on Constantinople in the east. Now the Turks took Constantinople, right? They captured that capital, And the queen, where did the queen shift to? The queen of Constantinople, where did she live after the Turks? Well, yes, she went to Rome, but, well, you can think of it like this. Now, both legs are in Rome. But then where did she go? Moscow. So can you see today, because Constantinople is still under the control of a Muslim country, that as far as Daniel's image is concerned, the left leg is standing on Moscow and the right leg is standing on Rome. Can you see, therefore, in order for Daniel's image to stand again in the last days, this left leg has got to come back and stand on Constantinople? Do you think that that means that Russia one day would want to invade Turkey? Do you think the Russians even care about Turkey? Think of it like this. When Sophia married Ivan and went to Moscow, a large proportion of the Christian population of Constantinople followed her straight to Moscow. And their money, and their culture, and their art, and their learning. So today, you could think of it like this, that the Russians would believe that, at least as far as their culture is concerned, they were born in Constantinople. As far as their blood is concerned, they say we were born in Kiev, we were born in the Ukraine. As far as our culture is concerned, we come from Constantinople. And there is no question that the Russians will want to take Constantinople back off the Turks. No question. So when you see Russia in Syria today, and the Turks going and doing a silly thing like shooting down a Russian fighter jet, and then Putin trying to agitate the Turkish president and provoke him into a military conflict, you can see exactly what Putin wants to do. He wants a reason. He just needs a reason to go and invade Turkey. He's tried it before, you know, not Putin, but previous Russian presidents or czars have tried it before. Okay. We're in Moscow, and there are history books you can read called The Three Romes. There is no question, you see, in history there were, or there are, three Romes. Rome, Constantinople, Moscow. And there's three pictures on the front of that book by Russell Fraser of the three Romes. Absolutely clear. No question at all in history. No question whatsoever. Now, what was happened, therefore, is in 1472, Ivan the Great is going to take the capital over here, Moscow. So here we are, I'll call it Ivan, 1472. So now we've got a capital over here in Rome, and we've got a capital over here in Moscow, and the Muslims are in control of that capital there. It's no longer under the control of a Christian Roman Empire. Okay, now come with me to Daniel chapter 2. What do you expect to happen next? Daniel 2 verse 41. Let's now talk about this last phase of the Roman Empire. Look what it says in verse 41. Whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. What's that saying? It's saying that the feet and toes of this image are part iron and part clay. But the only way that that particular phase of the empire has any strength is because of the iron. The clay is very weak. It can't actually form an empire. It's just clay. It's like pottery. But the iron, that's very strong. So what he's saying is that there's iron and clay in those feet. If it wasn't for the iron, there would be no empire whatsoever. Because the clay has no power to make an empire. It's just crumbly stuff. Look, verse 42. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, partly broken. It'll be strong inasmuch as it's made of iron, and it'll be broken or brittle inasmuch as it's made with clay. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they, that is the iron, shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, that's the clay. But they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So, what Daniel's saying in very simple terms is that unless there was iron in these feet and toes, there would be no empire of Rome in the last days whatsoever, because the clay has got no power to form an empire. All right. What would you expect to see, therefore? When you cast your mind back to Daniel chapter 2, we've got a progression of metals. Gold, silver, brass, iron and clay. That's what the metals are. And you'll have been told, young people, in public lectures many times, that those metals get less and less valuable. Gold is the most valuable, then silver, then brass, then iron, and then clay. So we would look at that and say, there's a decline in the value of the metals. That means that the governor of that empire is getting less and less powerful. Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of gold, he could make any law he liked, and he could keep it if he wished or break it if he wished, and whomso would he kept alive and whomso would he killed. He could do whatever he liked. He was a complete dictator. When you come down to the silver and the Medo-Persians, the king of Medo-Persia could make any law he liked, but you know the law of the Medo-Persians in Daniel chapter 6. Whatever law the king makes, he's got to keep. That's why Daniel found himself in the lion's den, remember? So the authority of the governor, or the king of that empire, was a little less. The Greeks, well, there were 4 empires of Greece, 4 divisions of the Greek Empire, 4 generals, if you like, who all warred against one another. By the time you got to Rome, you had a Caesar. Sometimes he was strong, sometimes he wasn't. He had to obey the Senate oftentimes, which is like a big committee. So what do you think it means then? What do you think it means when we come to the iron and clay? We've got a declining authority in the nature of the ruler of the empire as the quality of the metals gets less and less precious. What does it mean when you've got an empire of iron and clay? Well, we know what iron is. Iron in the last days must be Roman. And the only portion of the Roman Empire that's left today is Roman religion. So in the iron and clay of the toes, feet and toes, the iron portion is Catholicism, because that's all you've got left of the Roman Empire today. It's Catholicism. What's the clay? Well, it says the seed of man, but that doesn't really help you. Let me ask you this. If the whole point of Daniel's image is that the metals get less and less precious, and that therefore the ability or the authority of the ruler of that empire gets more and more diluted, why doesn't it say gold, silver, brass, iron, lead? Lead is less precious than iron. Why not say lead? Why say clay? Because you see, the point that Daniel's making is, if there was lead there, if the empire of the last days was a coalition of iron and lead, then the iron could help form an empire, and so could the lead. The lead could be like a solder. What he's saying here is, no, the empire of the last days exists on the basis of a common religion and a common religion alone. There is no political unity in the empire of the last days. It's clay, it's brittle, it crumbles. If it wasn't for the iron, now what am I going to say in plain English? If it wasn't for the fact that Western Europe was Catholic, they would have no alliance whatsoever. If it wasn't for the fact that Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy in Russia, or Russian Orthodoxy, are basically the same religion, there would be no unity between Russia and Western Europe whatsoever. There is no political similarity. And what we're expecting to see, you see, in the last days, is a coalition of countries who come together on the basis of a common religion, not because they have any political similarity. Now, what that means is, well, think about that. Where's the proof of that? Look at verse 44. In the days of these kings, plural. There are many kings in the divided empire of the last days. What that simply means is that France is going to retain the French language and go into war under its own colours. The Germans will speak German and they'll go into war under their colours. The Russians will speak Russian and go into Armageddon under their colours, and they will be united only on the basis of a common religion. So what we'd expect to see, therefore, in the last days is an empire that gets up off the ground, which is a resurrection of the old Roman Empire, united on the basis of a common religion and a common religion alone. Because clay has got no power to unite the empire. Do you see, therefore, the enormous significance in the Pope meeting Patriarch Kirill on Friday of Russia, the head of the Western Christian Church meeting the head of the Eastern or the Russian Christian church. It's the iron that will bring Eastern and Western Europe together. Now, what do you think of that? Ivan the Great, his dynasty, died off, and they were replaced by another Russian dynasty, or another great Russian family called the Romanovs. And the Romanovs took for their symbol what? A double-headed eagle. Can you see that the Russians are really Romans? I mean, what do you think the Rom in Romanov stands for? It's Romanov, isn't it? The Russians are Romans. They believe that they're Romans. They think of themselves as Romans. Well, they are. They're Eastern Romans, culturally from Constantinople. That's all they are. That's what the Russians are, you see. And there's our two sides of the Roman Empire. We've got Rome in the east, Rome in the west. We've gone down to Napoleon in the west. He's just toppled the Roman Empire there. And we've got Romanovs in the east. Well, blow me down. It didn't last long. And there was a fellow called Otto von Bismarck. He was a German chancellor in the late 1800s. And he decided that he would try, 1914, he would try and revive the Roman Empire in the West. And as a consequence of Bismarck's actions, World War I began. Now, Bismarck didn't begin the war. There was a different ruler of Germany, but Bismarck was the, if you like, the pioneer of the idea that Germany could re-establish the Holy Roman Empire and Germany could control Western Europe. Well, it didn't work, but they had another try in 1939. Now, who started the Second World War? What's his name? Adolf Hitler, absolutely. And do you know what Adolf Hitler dressed his soldiers up looking like? Like Nazis, like an eagle. That was the insignia of the Now, why an eagle? Well, why an eagle, of course? Why not an eagle? Could there be anything but an eagle, is the question. So Hitler marches his boys into war under the banner of the single-headed eagle because he represents the Western Roman Empire. He's trying to revive the Holy Roman Empire. Do you know what the German word for empire is? Now, you're a German. What's the German word for empire? You're a German, come on. Is Hagen German? We can wait. Okay, somebody else. What's the German word for empire? Reich. And what Reich did Hitler want to establish? The third. Well, what was the second? So here's the Third Reich. Here's the Second Reich. What was the First Reich? Well, Hitler wouldn't agree with Charlemagne because he was the frog, right? So he would say here that Barbarossa, Frederick of Barbarossa, about 1200 AD, the first German ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, that would be the First Reich as far as Hitler was concerned. Bismarck tried to establish the second. He would establish the Third Reich in 1939. A kingdom, by the way, which he expected that would rule upon the earth for 1,000 years. Where did he get that from? He got that straight out of Revelation chapter 20. He wanted to establish the kingdom of Hitler on earth. That's what he wanted to do. Well, it all went very badly for Hitler, of course. Well, badly for a lot of people, actually. But he lost the Second World War. And, Europe was carved up until 1989. And in 1989, they built the Berlin Wall. And they split Germany in two, and the Allies ruled half of Berlin, and the Russians ruled the other half of Berlin, and they had people in Spandau prison as war criminals and so forth. But then in 1989, East Germany and West Germany started talking, and they said, look, a generation has passed. Let's stop this nonsense. Let's take down the Berlin Wall, and let's reunite Germany. Now, why would Time magazine publish it like that? Because the eagle, the Western Roman eagle, has just come back to life. That's why Germany is united. Can you see that? And the Roman Empire in the West has just come back to life in 1989. Unbelievable. Well, we got to 1989. What's happening down here? Well, very bad things happened to the Romanov family, actually. In 1917, a very famous Russian came on the scene and ordered a revolution. He ran a revolution. What was his name? Not Putin, but same first name. Not Nikolai, no. Help me. Quickly, I've got 5 minutes left. Not Boris, no. Vladimir who? Lenin. And what did Lenin do? Well, he shot the Romanovs, didn't he? Took them to Ekaterinburg and shot them all and began the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. He got rid of that double-headed eagle that the Romanovs used to use. What did he put up in its place? Well, he put up a hammer and sickle because, of course, he represented the working man. Well, he was a working man and he had a strong jaw like a working man was Lenin. And in come communism into Russia for the best part of 80 years until 1989. Whoops. And what happens in 1989? Well, this Russian president called Mikhail Gorbachev comes on the scene and he introduces democracy. And he hauls down the hammer and sickle and he puts up a different flag, a white, blue and red flag. That's the flag of Russia today. But you want to know what the symbol of the Russian Federation is? That is the coat of arms of the Russian Federation. That's it there in the background. I got that faxed to me from the Russian embassy way back in the 90s just after it happened. I said, please send me a copy of the emblem of the Russian Federation. That's why it's not real good quality. Boom, through it comes, blow me down. It's the old Romanov eagle. What are these Russians doing? They've reinstalled the eagle of the Romanov Empire. Why? Because they want to recreate a Tsar. They want to revive the Eastern Roman Empire. How about that? Unbelievable. Here's a National Geographic from 1989. Look at this, 1983, extremely illuminating. Since claiming the Byzantine birthright, Russia has looked obsessively south. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Empire of Rome and Constantinople was called the Byzantine Empire. Because after the Romans, well, before Constantine made Constantinople the capital, it was called Byzantium. It was just a little Greek fishing town called Byzantium. Well, Russia, it says, claims the Byzantine birthright. And she's looked possessively south, meaning she's always wanted to go back and take Turkey. Like the Greeks, Catherine the Great, a Russian queen, had her own great idea. She says, I'd like to have a restored Byzantine Empire in the Balkans, ruled over from a reconquered Constantinople by my grandson Constantine. Can you believe Russians call their children names like Constantine? That's a Roman name. Why would the Russians call their children Roman names? They are Romans, do you see? They are Romans. She even hired John Paul Jones, an unemployed naval hero, to command a Russian flotilla fighting in that cause in the Black Sea. And so there was one Crimean War. There was a second Crimean War as Russia tried to invade Turkey, but the Allied powers, the Anglo and French powers, rebuffed her and stopped Russia coming to the Middle East because France and Britain wanted to control the Middle East themselves. Ironically, look at this. How scary is this? Russia came within a hairbreadth of gaining Constantinople and the Straits in World War I. The Allies promised them upon Turkey's defeat. Then her revolution knocked Russia out of the war, scuttling that prospect. Do you understand what that says? If Lenin hadn't come along, when did World War I finish? 1918. 1 year before the completion of World War I, Vladimir Lenin comes in and institutes the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, knocks Russia out of the war. If Lenin had come 1 year later, Russia would have won the war and they would have owned Constantinople in 1918. Let me tell you this. If Russia owned Constantinople in 1918, they would already own Israel by now. What did the angels do? What was the purpose of the Russian Revolution then? Because all that's happened is we had the Romanov dynasty up until Lenin in 1917. From 1989, well, you can see we've just basically reinstated the Russian double-headed eagle. What was the purpose of communism? Well, it put the whole progress of the Russian Tsardom on ice for about 80 years. What critical fact happened in the Middle East in that 80 years? Well, in 1948, we created the nation of Israel. Russia can't attack Israel until Israel exists. They were all set to do it after the First World War. They would have done it with Britain's blessing after the First World War. The Angels say, whoa, that can't happen. They wheel in Vladimir Lenin. He destroys the place for 80 years. Then they say, OK, Israel's back in the land. They've got established. Hit pause. Fast forward again. And off we go with the plan for Russia to invade the Middle East. Can you see that? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And then you have clowns like this. So here's somebody, he's getting a bit old now, but he would have liked to have been the Prime Minister or the President of Russia. And he wrote a book. Now, you probably can't read that. Let me tell you what that book says. So here's Vladimir Zhirinovsky. Everybody in Russia is called Vladimir, right? If you go to Russia and you don't know what their name is on the street, just say Vladimir, you probably get it right. He's written a book called The Last Leap South. Now, here's somebody in our day, he's still alive, in our day, writing books. I mean, this is like Hitler writing Mein Kampf. He's written a book called The Last Leap South. Where does he plan to leap to? He plans to leap into the Indian Ocean. Not just Turkey, all the way south. How's he plan to get there? Well, he's holding it under his left arm. This is the Russian dream, you see. We take Turkey. We don't just stop after Turkey. And then, and I'm watching my clock, I've got 2 minutes, blow me down. What has to happen for all of this to occur is that Eastern and Western Europe have to hold hands. They can only hold hands, as far as Daniel chapter 2 is concerned, on the basis of a common religion. Well, this is the Pope meeting the Patriarch of Constantinople. Now that means the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church of Constantinople meets the Catholic Pope. And this meeting took place in 1964 in Jerusalem. That was the first time for the best part of 1,000 years that the Roman Catholic pontiff had met the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church. So that was a groundbreaking relationship that began again in 1967. Look, those two at that point revoked the mutual bulls of excommunication which they had issued against each other in about 1054 AD. So after the best part of 1,000 years, all of a sudden, the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Pope of Rome are talking again. Now let me tell you something about the Eastern Orthodox Church. So the Catholic Church in Western Europe, we know quite a bit about that. The Pope controls everything. They all do what he says. In Eastern Europe, it's a little bit different. Each country has its version of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And those individual churches are like ecclesias. They all believe the same thing, but they have a fair amount of autonomy. Any idea how many Catholics there are in the world? Roughly. 1.2 billion. That's what the Pope controls in Western Europe. Any idea how big Eastern Orthodoxy is in the world? About 220 million. So you can see Catholicism is substantially bigger. So when these two men meet each other, the fellow on the right is much, much more powerful than the fellow on the left. But in the Eastern Orthodox world, every country has its own church or its own system. So there is Greek Orthodoxy in Greece. There's, if you like, let's call it Turkish Orthodoxy in Turkey. There's Russian Orthodoxy in Russia. And they have a certain amount of autonomy. This meeting is between the Pope and the Patriarch of Constantinople. Well, how powerful do you think the Patriarch of Constantinople really is? I mean, he's running the Eastern Orthodox Church in a country which is controlled by Muslims. He's not actually that powerful. If you're going to try and unite East and West in terms of religion, you've really got to meet, the Pope's really got to meet the Russian Orthodox Patriarch. Because of that 220 million, Russia has 160 million. Well, that's why we make such a big deal about the meeting on Friday. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Pope met the Patriarch of Moscow. And that's the Eastern Orthodox Patriarch you've really got to meet. That's the man who can do whatever requires to be done. Why? Why did that meeting take place? Well, you see, the Pope Francis has been for years now, asking to meet the Patriarch of Moscow. And the Patriarch of Moscow has said no, because he thinks the Pope is recruiting on his territory. He thinks the Pope wants to take over his church. Well, you can see the Pope's a very powerful man. He does want to take over his church. Then what changed? Why did the Patriarch of Moscow all of a sudden last week agree to meet the Pope? Because he was told to. Who told him to? Vladimir. All Russians are called Vladimir. You see? And why did Putin tell that patriarch to go and meet the Pope? Because we've got the greatest persecution of Christianity in the Middle East today that's happened for decades. And if East and West doesn't hold hands and get together, we could face the rise of another Muslim empire called ISIS. The last time a Muslim empire rose, they attacked Constantinople. And as far as Putin's concerned, he says the only reason Constantinople fell in 1453 was because the Western Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, never came to the rescue of the East. That will never happen again. East and West will unite against the possible formation of an Islamic empire, and they'll destroy it. Therefore, you go and meet the Papa. Kiss him 3 times on each side, and be friends. Understand, the Pope owns his own little country in Italy called the Vatican City. The Patriarch of Moscow, he doesn't own anything. He does whatever the president says. He does whatever Putin says. Putin said, agree to his requirements. Go and have a meeting. Yeah, go and have it in Cuba. Smoke a cigar. But make sure you come out friends. That's just happened 2 days ago. That is unbelievable. And you're watching, I'm finished, I'm done. You're watching East and West hold hands now, and it must be, and must only be, by the power of united religion, that the Roman Empire will rise again in the last days.